Hello, everyone. I'll say good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. I'm just going to briefly introduce myself. My name is Patrick Coates. I am the CEO of the Assessment Association. I'm also chair of the Special Interest Group for Online Proctoring. So I'm here with some colleagues from within the industry. And what I'm going to do in the first instance, everyone could just introduce themselves and say where they're from. Michelle, if I can start with you.
Hi, everyone. Michelle Lockwood. I am the Global Vice President of Product Management at Prometric, based in the US.
Adarsh.
Hi, everyone. I am Adarsh Sudendra from ExcelSoft. I'm the Vice President for Growth and Strategy at ExcelSoft. I work primarily out of Boston, but currently attending this webinar from India.
Greg.
Yep, Greg Anderson, Product Manager for OnView Online Proctoring at Pearson VUE out of Boston.
And finally, Sharad.
Hey, everybody. This is Sharad. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Mercer Metal.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to provide a bit of context for this session. Now, I deal with people every day in my sort of day job, working with people who are talking about online proctoring and how they use it. Now, the intention of this session is to really provide an opportunity for people to understand a little bit more about what's involved, how it works, etc. So I think that what we found is over the last probably 2 or 3 years with the pandemic, the adoption of online proctoring increased exponentially. Obviously, people were looking for alternatives. Now, the thing is, online proctoring has actually been around now probably for 10, 12 years. It's not a new thing, but I think it was the pandemic that really brought it to the fore of everyone's mind. And I think the other thing that's happening now is the use of AI and how that's making a big impact on things. So what I was trying to do in the initial term is to think and try and work out what the approach would be in terms of how you could categorize online proctoring. So I did speak to the speakers before this session, and I was just talking about how they could describe it. And broadly, I think there's 4 different categories of online proctoring. There's record and review, which is typically where a session is recorded, and then the proctor or the invigilator looks at the recording, or AI looks at recording afterwards, and then decides whether something untoward was happening. Now, that's fine. I think it works very well where you've got large volumes of students taking exams, perhaps taking the same paper or the same exam, and you don't mind if that paper gets out into the public domain, because of course you've not got to be able to protect the integrity of that exam. Of course, you find out 2 days later that someone was taking a picture of the screen. There's nothing you can do about it. The second form is probably where AI is making the decision. This is probably quite new. It's not widely accepted, probably for various reasons, where it's a live exam. The AI is actually making the decision about whether that exam could continue or not. So it's no human intervention. The AI, based on some defined criteria, is deciding whether that exam should happen or not. Then we've got AI assisted or augmented or supported, where there's still a human proctor who's making that decision. However, the AI is making that, is sort of providing a prompt to the proctor to say, I think there's something untoward going on here. It could be head movement, it could be audio, it could be one of a variety of different factors. I don't think all organizations necessarily share what's being looked at, because they don't want to give people an opportunity to be able to try and sort of avoid doing those things if they're going to get picked up for cheating. And then finally, the classic model, which probably best simulates a live test center environment, is where live proctoring, which is someone's watching you on a screen, typically multiple visions on the screen. You might have 8, 10, 12, whatever it is. People actually taking the exam, and what's happening is you're looking at those and making a decision about whether you think something untoward happened. Now, what the rules are, I think, in terms of, do you give people a warning, do you just stop them taking the exam, is probably up to the individual test sponsors. So we sort of broadly come under that. But what I'm going to do now is just get each of our my fellow speakers to talk a little bit about, just for a few minutes, I will stop them if they go on for too long, about their particular solution, because I know that we've got different solutions in different formats represented here. So I'll start with you, Michelle, because you're top left on my screen.
Sure, absolutely. So at Prometric, we have today 3 different modalities of remote testing. Patrick, as you noted, we have your typical where you mirror in-center environment as much as possible with our live proctors. So it would be a live agent throughout the entire end-to-end session with the candidate. And we actually have 3 different tiers of agents that the candidate would work with during that live remote proctoring session. So there's a readiness agent who would go through all of the checks, understanding, making sure that Patrick is Patrick, going through the client practice, what are they and aren't they allowed to have and do? Are they allowed breaks? Is it a scheduled break or unscheduled break? And then once they pass that piece, they would get transferred to the proctor. And then during the actual proctoring of the session, if there's any AI flags that are thrown to the proctor or anything that they witness and see that needs investigation, again, based on the client practice, they could be escalated to a security agent who would do that investigation so the proctor is still able to really focus on the rest of the candidates that they're proctoring. We also have AI only, so it's a fully automated AI solution end-to-end. There's no live humans during the entire event. The client would get the review portal to be able to see the full recording, any AI flags that were thrown, and make any determinations at that point. And then we also have an AI plus review. So that's the same thing, fully automated end-to-end, but our professional proctors post-event would review all the footage, the AI flags, and help make determinations for the client when then they would ultimately be able to make the final decision on what they want to do. All 3 of those modalities use our tried, true, and tested processes and procedures that we have from test centers. So it's the same end-to-end experience. It's just whether if there's a live agent or the AI is running it completely end-to-end.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michelle. Sharad, can I go over to you now as well?
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick and Michelle. And I think it is pretty much the same as Michelle mentioned. So depending upon the stakes of the exam and what is the client's budget, the timeline, so on and so forth, we have the 3 models as well. So at the highest is AI plus human proctoring. So whereas the AI is looking at the candidate's behavior, their webcam feed, screen feed, audio feed, so on and so forth. And there's also a live human proctor who could be looking at what we call as a classroom view. So there are tiles on the screen and AI is putting up the flags where they determine some sort of unfair means may be getting used. And it's a combination. So AI will assist the human proctor and then the final call will be taken by the human proctor. They could chat with the candidate. They could pause the test if they are not satisfied with the responses. And in extremely rare and maybe where they're completely convinced that cheating was happening, they would even terminate the test. So this is for the high stake test. The second model is AI only, where there's no human intervention. The AI basically takes their snapshots of screens, webcams, audio, and then the report is actually given to the clients for them to take any call. And the third is where AI does capture all the anomalies, and then there is a review process which our team does or the client team does, where they basically go through what AI has thrown up and then take a final call.
Okay, thanks, Sharad. Adarsh, over to you.
Thanks, Patrick. What Patrick said, since COVID, we have seen a steep rise in the number of companies that have jumped into providing online remote proctoring platform and services. So as a result, what we see generally is that it has become a buyer's market. So every organization that is looking for an online remote proctoring platform today wants more out of the features and services that you provide. So as a provider, if we are limiting, we realize that we are limiting ourselves to a handful of options in remote proctoring. It's very hard for us to convince our buyers and be competitive in the market. So we are seeing customers from different parts of the globe, not just the Western countries, but also the Far East and others, where we see a big range of organizations that deliver exams primarily in live remote proctoring setting. There are organizations that do deliver some exams in live remote proctoring and others with AI screening. Sometimes the same exam is delivered with different types of remote proctoring based on the geography it is delivered in. So, so at ExcelSoft, we cover the gamut, the entire gamut, right from a simple, secure browser-based exam delivery. It's like an onion with multiple layers. Every layer adds an additional layer of security towards it. So you start with a simple secure browser that lets a user to the test taking window. You can add another layer by bringing in image-based automated proctoring, what we call. So some of the emerging economies where internet bandwidth is still not a ubiquity, it's still a scarce resource. Streaming up the entire video stream of the user along with the screen is expensive. It is not a viable solution. So we take images at regular intervals so that it works in the remotest parts of countries like India, Southeast Asia, where like I said, bandwidth is not a ubiquity. The next level is video-based record and review, where the entire video session of the exam along with the candidate session is captured and made available for review. Of course, you have the AI screening at both these layers. And then finally, you have the live proctoring, which brings in the human element. And then you have the augmentation part where the AI tries to assist the human proctor by bringing their attention to potential malpractice events. So we have tried to make it very convenient to our customers. All these options are available at the click of a button as configuration. So when you're scheduling an exam, options such as secure browser, the type of remote proctoring that you want to use, and even the choice of using a secondary camera are all options that we can choose from. It's essentially a buffet of options that we could pick and choose from, making it extremely convenient for our customers.
Thank you very much. And Greg, sorry you got the last slot because it's difficult to talk about something when everyone else is sort of doing similar things. But particularly perhaps if you can talk a little bit as well, because obviously, Michelle, you'll get an opportunity later perhaps to talk a bit about, particularly with your online proctoring as well as if you've got a test center network as well. So maybe mention a bit about the test center network at the end as well.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. And I think that you mentioned it too in the prep that the AI space right now, it's really hot, right? It's in every conversation. It's burgeoning, but Pearson VUE has been doing some sort of AI and automation since 2017. So we've been at this now for about 6 years. For us, it's an assistive technology to keep our humans in the loop. It merely forms an opinion where our employees can actually make decisions. So in that case, we have live proctoring, assistive AI, and also record and review. And clients have the opportunity to turn those technologies off if they want to.
That is interesting. That actually, I'm going to follow up on that, and I will ask other people as well. So, I mean, how do you ensure there isn't bias? Now, I know that, like you said, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a big thing about bias and discrimination, etc., from AI. So, what do you do as an organization to ensure that there isn't bias, put very simply?
Hey, let me keep going on this one.
Yeah, keep going on that one,
Sure,
and then
sure,
I'll go backwards, work around.
Yeah, because bias, right? It's there, and so it's about making sure it's minimized. You have low bias and high efficacy. So we do a couple things. First, we have an impartial third-party auditor that comes in and audits our technology on an annual basis to make sure that it is performant and there is low bias. And then we have internal metrics and analytics set up to throw alerts to us in case any of those biases skew for any reason whatsoever. So we're monitoring closely, making sure that they're performant and they have low bias. And we've built our systems in such a way where if there is some sort of bias or the technologies aren't performant, then we can actually replace them. It's an interchangeable system. So we use mainstream technologies, but if for some reason we have to switch them out, we can do so.
So it's making sure you've got that safety net in place. So Michelle, can I ask you the same question or a similar question around the ensuring there isn't bias, or perhaps obviously Greg's just mentioned about auditing Do you do something similar, or do you have a different variation of that?
Yeah, we do. So, first and foremost, we're all about the governance of AI and data as a whole. And we have a third party as well that we have an ongoing relationship with, who is constantly helping us from a modeling standpoint, a technology standpoint, a data governance standpoint, an AI standpoint. And we're constantly auditing to understand if there are any biases, and how to ensure that we're limiting the number of false positives that we have. So that's an ongoing, basically a maintenance task for us on an ongoing basis. And as Greg mentioned as well, our AI doesn't make any final decisions. There's always a human, whether it's Prometric or our client, who makes all final determinations. So it's never up to the AI to make any final determinations.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I was at a conference last week, and AI was probably on 80% of the presentations, and there's mixed emotion. I think it's one of those things, it's a tool at the end of the day. And like any tool, you can use it for good and for bad. You can use it in the right way and the wrong way. And I think it's just ensuring that there's, that control over it. Sharon, if I could just ask you a question, slightly different variation, because we've got AI, we realize that people are, I'll use the word cheating rather than being polite about it. People are cheating on the exam, you're realizing that. Are you using the videos of people cheating on their exam or other things to train the AI to the decision making? Is it done like that, or is it totally separate?
That's a great question, Pat. And I think to start with, what I would like to maybe also follow up on what Michelle mentioned. So we don't look at bias only in terms of how we are applying AI, but in its entirety on the entire platform. So we are an examination assessment platform, plus proctoring is an additional feature. And we are pretty serious about and concerned about EEOC. So that talks about bias, privacy, and discrimination. So there are processes and audits in place which not only look at the AI algorithms or the activities that we do with AI, but also, for example, if we have a Java developer test, now has that test been really validated across various geos? And the question should not have any sort of bias that one race or ethnicity is able to answer them easily. So that is the level from where we basically look at each activity. To train our data sets, we don't rely on videos. What we do is, like others correctly mentioned, that even in a lot of developed world, the cost of data is not so cheap. In fact, India is one of the countries with cheapest data. So what we try to do is we try to optimize it. We capture images on regular intervals. And these are the images that we constantly train our AI algorithms on. So every quarter, we basically retrain the AI algo on all the cheating cases that we have found or the clients have sort of highlighted. So just to give an example, we have one flag. We call all the anomalies as flags that are raised by AI, where an additional person is detected on the screen. Now, for us, the additional person need not be completely on screen. So that means I need not have somebody standing behind me with their full face visible. But the AI has been trained such that even if I have the shoulder visible, or if I just have some body part visible partially, we are able to call it out. So yes, every quarter we relook at the various cases where we've seen cheating happening, and then feeding those back into the AI algorithm, annotate them, and then train it accordingly.
Okay, Adarsh, finally, if I could ask that to you as well about how the AI is trained and what's involved.
Yeah. So when it comes to training the AI models, Pat, it's very different in different geographies, right? So in some of the Western economies, North America, the UK, and everywhere, the data privacy laws are very strict. You can only use the captured videos for the purpose they were captured for, which is detection of anomalies, assisting the proctor. You cannot be using them to train your models. So that's generally the part of the agreement and part of the consent form that we take. from the students when they start the exam. In some of the other geographies where it's a bit more lenient, we get the option to use that data to train our models. So it really depends on the law of the land. And then to handle bias, obviously bias does exist, like Greg mentioned. It's important to have diversity in your training data. A range of ethnicities, to reduce bias, especially in facial recognition and behavior analysis. And also, getting your algorithms. So these are essentially models. When it comes to AI, they're essentially depending on a model. It's an algorithm at the core of it. So regular audits of these algorithms from third parties to identify and rectify any biased decision making is very important, because you work, your engineering team works with certain assumptions with the training data that you have. A third party audit, a regular third party audit of these algorithms will definitely assist in being on track.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question here that I'm going to read out because it was actually on my list of questions. So someone said, could you throw some light on how videos and AI are tuned to protect the privacy and personal attributes of the candidates? So I'll ask that to you, Michelle, around I know there was a recent case in the US around a student was saying, I won't go into the details of it, about you're not allowed to show the camera of my house, whatever, it's unconstitutional. I think the issue in that particular case was because there wasn't an alternative for that student and he was being forced in that route. But I think there's a lot of drama about that, but it seems to have moved on in the world. But Michelle, so about that, around candidate privacy, what would you say would be the answer to that about?
Yep, absolutely. So as Adarsh mentioned, it all comes down to legal, our user agreements, our privacy policy, making sure that our candidates understand what they are and are opting in to those, and being very clear on how we are and aren't using video, their data, if it's being shared with any third parties, what that looks like fully. And then from there, if they don't agree to any of that, we always have accommodations. As you said, Patrick, the issue was there wasn't another accommodation. So if someone is not going to agree, they don't want a 360 room scan, they don't want their video footage to be recorded and stored, we can certainly make accommodations. And again, it's all comes down to the test sponsor, to what they want to do and how they want to make accommodations that we could then accommodate, whether that be in test center, a paper-based test versus a remote. And then in terms of the data privacy and how we're protecting the personal attributes. So we're not taking any of the personal or social attributes in our video recordings. So as we look at a video, it's not looking to see this is a male, this is a female, this is what race the person is or anything like that. It's purely looking at the actions within a video. We're ignoring everything else from a personal biometric per se, as we're training our AI and systems. We also have, a 30-day standard retention policy of that data, but we can alter that and configure that to whatever the test sponsor and whatever region those candidates are testing in would require. So we're accommodating, configurable, and able to constantly keep up to date on how all the data privacy laws are changing. As I said, we also have a third party that is an expert in this field with AI, data privacy, and governance of the data and technology that we're constantly working with and learning as an organization as this trend and topic continues to evolve.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Greg, I'm going to put there's another question, Greg, which it's all on the same topic, and I love this. I had lots of questions prepared because I was worried that people wouldn't ask questions, but they are. So in the EU, we have privacy policy which are extremely strict, and in some cases, GDPR requires the server's data to be placed in the EU. How do you deal with EU privacy policy directives?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Michelle said. Thanks, Michelle, for that. We work closely with our legal team related to GDPR. Data policies, that was the #1 requirement when we launched OnView in 2015. So they're aggressive. Like Michelle said, we delete everything in a worst case scenario in 30 days or in a more aggressive fashion. So we only collect what we need and then we delete it once we don't need to use it anymore. And of course, if candidates aren't comfortable with that for online proctoring, and they can simply just go to a test center as well.
Okay. Adarsh, I'm going to go to you. So again, on the same theme around your answer about the EU and storing data, plus there's another question asking about, do you have the exam recordings and ID, etc.? Are they stored separately? Are they stored together? How does that work? If you could explain about that.
Yeah. So when it comes to data privacy and storage, now it's a multi-step process. One of the most basic things that all providers generally do is data encryption. So all the data is encrypted end to end, not just at rest but also in transit. Number two is having strict access controls, because stringent access controls to restrict who can access the stored data. Is it just the proctors or other stakeholders in the platform ecosystem? Having now strict user access controls is very important. Number three is now outlining privacy policies and communicating them to all participants, including the candidates. So everybody is aware of how the data is being managed throughout the platform ecosystem, what all workflows the data goes through, so that people are aware and conscious about it. And anonymizing data is very important. So like Michelle mentioned, even Greg reinforced on top of that. So the identifiable and personally identifiable information, PII, is never stored by any of the providers, most of the providers, including us at Silsoft. We just capture what is minimally needed, which includes the video and the audio and the screen of the candidate, run the necessary screening algorithms, and then capture the flags. That's it. So there's no deductions made based on the candidate's name or any such ID or any such information. In fact, none of that information is even passed on to the remote proctoring platform. Regarding storage, Patrick, storage primarily depends on institutional policies and legislation. So the duration for which any such data is stored is usually determined by institutional policies and the applicable legislation. So now it depends on the customer. If the organization wants it for more than 30 days, we keep it for more than 30 days. If they want it for 15 days, we keep it for 15 days. And it is definitely kept now in isolation. It is never mixed with any PII. First of all, the PII never flows into, again, I'm trying to reiterate the same thing, never flows into the remote proctoring platform. Just the ID is what we need to tie it back to the user. Even if it is flowing into the remote proctoring platform primarily for display and aesthetic purposes, it is never stored or associated with any of the video capture or any remote proctoring related data.
So I'm going to go to you, Sharon, but what I've just before that. So I think if I'm sort of summarizing what everyone's saying is, you're storing the data responsibly, compliant with GDPR, or there's similar FEPRA, I think it is in the US, etc. I know California's got its own, and each country has. But you're also, it's up to the people that own the test, who are the responsible, whatever, about what the laws are about how long you can keep data for. So it can be as long and short as you require. I mean, I saw when we're working with the awarding organizations who were keeping scripts for 7 years, 10 years, because that was the law. I don't know what's going to happen with them, but obviously we're not in that situation where we're storing information for that long. Is that fair to say, Sharon, that the key is actually having an approach that is appropriate for different countries, different jurisdictions, different customers? Is it that flexibility that's a key and answer to all of this?
Exactly, Patrick. And I think most of the platforms today, they tend to be highly customizable. And like Michelle mentioned, so all of these laws are constantly evolving. So we had GDPR first, and now practically every country is coming up with a law which is more or less similar to GDPR, but there are certain nuances to these laws. In our experience of working with our clients in EU and other regions since GDPR came, what we have figured is that depending upon the client and the sector, so we work with education institutes, we work with corporates, we work with governments, and all three of these, they look at data retention as a separate subject altogether. So for example, certain countries, certain governments, and even educational institutes, they have provisions wherein the students can actually request for a reval, or they can challenge a decision 6 months after the exam, or maybe even 1 year after the exam has taken place. In case of government exams, it runs into years, especially in India. So what we have done is two things. One is we have made our platform highly customizable, so the customer can themselves choose to auto forget the data in their accounts itself. So we didn't want to. So we initially tried to handle it customer per customer basis, but what we figured is that the way this whole privacy discussion is evolving, let's give it in the hands of the customers themselves. So now even if you want that your data to be deleted on a daily basis, you can just go into your account and you can set an auto forget for 24 hours. So 24 hours after the exam, the data will be automatically deleted. Now this is again a double-edged sword, because if somebody without any foresight does it, and then there is an inquiry which comes after 1 month or 6 months, then it is a problem. But the liability goes to clients. So we have kept various different modes in which this can be set. Secondly, we also give comfort to the candidates as well as the clients in terms of the fact that we reiterated that we comply with GDPR and we respect the individual data subject right requests. So maybe the client and the candidate have different views in which the data is being handled and retained for. So the data subject can always reach out to us for a data deletion. We hook them up with the client. We tell them that we cannot delete it because we are the processor. You need to go and speak to the controller. And if they approve, in special cases, we go ahead and we delete the data. So yes, it has to be highly customized because I don't think there is one size fit all.
I'm sorry, I should have said at the beginning, by the way, that the intention is we're going to do this, chunk this up afterwards and make it into a podcast. So that's why I'm reading out all the questions, because obviously people listening won't be able to see the questions that are on the screen. So, so the question here about privacy preservation, they're asking questions. I'm paraphrasing here about deepfake morphing in terms of is that a viable option as a means of identification, etc. I think it's something I read about actually a few days ago, where it was like this big thing about, oh, you can cheat the systems, etc. I've seen it. It's been around for a very, very long time in a gaming context, obviously being used in negative ways elsewhere. Is this something that could be used in exam and to say someone else, etc.? I'll start with you, Greg, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds good. And I think we've been talking a lot about AI today, but AI is just one layer of security. I think, Adarsh, you also mentioned that there was a secure browser. That's another layer of security. So like in test centers and in OnView, we have multiple layers of security to rely on too. So we do have some layers of security that can block and thwart and detect some of those possible deep fake scenarios. So
I must say, I mean, I should have said that at the beginning. I mean, I've worked with organizations that deliver tests, and you cannot say that test centers are 100% secure. They're different in other ways. They're a single point. You've got one person in the test center that obviously could be corrupted or got to in some way, or two people. There's lots of situations. So no sort of, I guess, system is perfect. It's a question of how you manage that in terms of, putting as much that you can in place to hopefully minimize that as much as possible. Again, we haven't got time for it here, but some of the lengths people go to be able to scam an exam and cheat in it, you would not believe. You could have a whole session just on that. I'm going to go back to some other questions in a minute, but just something that I wanted to ask, because online proctoring, obviously you are relying on the internet, which we know can have vagaries. You're reliant on people who are remote to the test taker, who again using the internet to communicate. Can I just check? I'll ask this to Adarsh. How are you ensuring that the technical component is checked in advance, or do you check it in advance, or is it on the day? Can you just explain about that, please?
Yeah. So leading up to the exam, it's very important that you have a very strong communication channel with all the candidates. It's very important to educate all the candidates ahead of time on on all the prerequisites for the exam, right? So otherwise, the candidates will walk in most of the time. The candidates will walk in an hour before the exam and try to set things up, and that time, the 15-20 minutes just before the exam, is where there's a lot of panic and anxiety in the candidates, right? So there's a lot of stress, and most of the support calls that we get is around that time, because candidates have not gone through the communication, the emails about the mock exams, and then they just walk in with a random laptop where none of the prerequisites are met. So it's very important that we have two things in place. Number one is before the exam itself, there has to be a prerequisite check. So at ExcelSoft, we have a small little module that runs a prerequisite check on the candidate's machine. There's a 5-step process where, number one, you check on the operating system the candidate is running on. It has to be a compliant operating system. Number two is the minimum hardware requirement. Number three is the necessary bandwidth, right? So there has to be a minimum bandwidth that the candidate needs to have in order to be able to pass this check. It has to have a working microphone. Number five is it has to have a working camera. So only if the candidate passes these prerequisite checks are they allowed to move on to the next step. Otherwise, they'll not even see the next screen. So this is something that has to be in place, in order to avoid any disruptions during the exam. Before leading to the day of the exam, it's important to have, like I said, multiple emails educating the candidates on the various steps to be followed. One of the very interesting things that we have started doing with all our customers is to push for a mock exam, an exam which is 10 minutes in duration, has 5 sample questions, but is very similar in experience to the actual exam. So the candidates have to go through this mock exam at least a day before the actual exam. Go through this experience, go through the prerequisite check, launch the exam, be comfortable about the layout, the screen layout and everything, and then submit the exam. With that, we have the confidence that the candidate has gone through the prerequisites and we will be able to successfully launch the exam. But in spite of all these, there will be a small fraction of candidates who will face issues, who will have that last minute panic, which will have to be handled with the support team.
I said it's great to communicate as much as possible, unless you're dealing with university age students, in which case, no matter how many times you communicate, they will still ignore you and then claim that they never received anything and they weren't told about it. So, Michelle, so I'm going to ask both this to you and Greg. So obviously you've got a very established center network with people, with staff who are trained to do their job. Is that something is it a similar training that you get for remote proctors, etc.? Is it very different? How does that work?
Yeah, so as I mentioned previously, we use all of our same processes and procedures from the test center in our remote setting as well. So all of our proctors go through extensive training and certification and ongoing training to be able to be a proctor. So if they don't pass these certifications, if they don't sit through these trainings, they cannot sit to be a proctor or any sort of agent for us. So that's a constant ongoing practice. And as you said, the cheating trends that we see today, they're constantly evolving. The amount of time and effort and the whole industry that's out there around this. We have a whole team that's constantly investigating and researching what those trends are. And that is always being trained to all of our proctors. We actually have internal gamification really across all of our agents and centers and remote. If they find cheating, there's an award. So we also incentivize for them to really do their jobs, do it well, and to help educate what they're seeing on the daily basis in the center and in remote, so that we're always, have our finger on the tap of what's happening.
So the same to you, Greg, though I'm sure Michelle's probably answered most of it. Is there a different perspective on that?
Yeah, what Michelle said, plus the environments are just very different. So similar test centers, we take some of their best practices to OnView, and we take some of OnView's best practices to them. But with OnView, the proctors are limited to this frame that you see me within here. So they're trained on these techniques for watching suspicious eye movement and camera issues. But we're lucky. We have both models to trade back and forth those best practices.
So depending on which the modality of delivery will impact on what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Sharad, so in terms of the different sectors, okay, I'm going to generalize here. I'm going to exclude probably the, K-12 because that's very, very different beast, but it's also like university, college age, etc. And then you've got workforce. Is it different for different audiences? Is it accepted that maybe you get the premium product for corporate and less so for universities? Is it like that, Sharon?
Definitely. So I would not really tag it as a premium or a non-premium product, Patrick. But we basically consult our clients as to what is the outcome that you guys want out of this engagement. See, so while yes, we've been talking about online proctoring and ways and means to prevent cheating, but I think one of the very important aspects that we always need to keep in mind is the candidate experience. I mean, you really cannot disrupt that because think of it. I mean, we are here to write a test which may be very important for either my career or my degree or any certification that I'm sort of appearing for, and there is all of this technology which is at play and which has to work correctly, and on top of that there are these processes, right? So what the manner in which we consult our clients is that we basically ask them that what is the sort of audience that they are expecting for a particular test. What is the propensity of cheating, or in their past experiences, what have they sort of found? And that is how we go ahead and we recommend what sort of proctoring stack they should use. Looking back, what we have seen is that corporates, unless it is a selection sort of an assessment, uh, they are not too much bothered about proctoring per se, because if it is a learning and development engagement where they just want to make sure that you are doing it and you're doing it correctly. I mean, you are focused, because some of these are paid consultants who are brought in from outside, so they wouldn't be wanting wasting money. So they would probably just deploy an AI proctoring. But the same client, when they're going for a hiring drive, right, where people may be getting job offers post the assessment and an interview, I think the same client would opt for a slightly higher proctoring stack. And same thing for Edu Institutes. We work with a lot of MBA and engineering colleges in India and abroad. And what we've seen is for their regular weekly quizzes and exercises, I think they just need AI proctoring. But if it is a semester exam, some of them have actually gone to the extent of deploying the second camera. And I know it's a very touchy topic, but like I said, so we have all the tech and the features, and it's up to the clients to enable and disable what they want.
Yeah, that was one of the, I've actually got a section on the second camera bit, which I will go through in a second. So Adarsh, because obviously I'm just going to ask you the same question I just asked Sharad as well. So obviously he was talking about workforce assessment, academic assessment, etc. Similar for you, is it, what Sharad was saying?
Yes, absolutely. So now in academia, generally the frequency of running exams, the volume of exams is very high. So generally they tend to opt a more cost-effective mode of remote proctoring, which includes AI screening. Whereas now when it comes to the corporates or certification exams or competitive exams, it's essentially a balance between user experience on one hand and the integrity and security of the exam on the other hand. If there are in competitive exams, corporate certification exams, they value integrity more than the user experience. For them, test security means more than the user experience. So they tend to go for the more stricter options in remote proctoring. In academia, while test security is important, because of the volume of the exams and the frequency at which they happen, the cost shoots up really quickly. So they tend to go with the more cost-effective options that include more AI screening and less human intervention.
Yeah, I'm going to actually now touch on that second camera, and I'm going to ask you, Greg. Now, we have had this conversation before. I'm going to just preempt that by saying I actually just Googled before this session about how much people cheat, and I was just trying to look up to see what came up with. Unfortunately, there seems to be the culture of people that it's okay to cheat. There doesn't seem to be. I mean, when I was younger, I was far too very good. Now I'd be too scared to cheat on an exam, honest. But it seems that culturally it's become more accepted. Whether that's because you've got a distance between you and the person that if they find you, they're going to embarrass you in front of a room with everybody else. You're at home, yeah, fair cop. I'm going to wander off and do it. So I know that in some countries where I've worked, it is actually against the law to cheat on an exam, and it is a criminal offence. And okay, what they're going to do about it is another thing. So I guess one is we've got to make sure that the academic institutions or the sponsors, or whoever it is, make out that it's not okay to cheat, actually, by the way, and there are repercussions for doing it. So it's not all just about the technology. I just wanted to add to that. So Greg, so about the second camera, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're right, Sharad. Hot topic, right? I've been now in the industry since 2011, going on 14 years, and second camera has come and gone throughout the conversation, but it just really started to enter the mainstream conversation over the past year, and I really haven't heard any anecdotal feedback about it until recently. But it's at face value, when I talk to clients about this, sounds great. Everyone says, wow, we should do that. But then when you start to unpack it and look into all the considerations around second camera, you have this other device, this other piece of hardware that's going to sit somewhere back here, and it has to be propped somewhere back here. And I don't even have a table back here. It needs to be attached to a power source, right? It has to also take from the capacity of the candidate's bandwidth, which, as we all know, globally is still not there. It's still tough, right? We have to make sure it also doesn't introduce a new security hole. This device would probably have to be locked down, or else now we're opening up a hole to maybe steal exam content another way, right? If there are any problems with this, there's also a large operational lift to fix whatever the issues are. So there's just lots of considerations to think about for test sponsors before they use this technique. Also, what if everything goes right and now you have another person standing behind this camera, right? This goes back to the layers of security approach, where we have multiple layers of security that addresses some of what the real fears and concern with second camera are. So we don't yet see the benefits of this. I think it was Tim in chat who said, which is the highest priority, candidate experience or test security? Second camera would certainly affect the candidate experience and cause friction for the majority of candidates who are just trying to get their certification and show their family and friends, I'm certified.
I'm going to ask you, Michelle, because I mean, I like that. I've seen demonstrations of people using second cameras on tripods and everything else, and I know certainly, speaking from a UK perspective, but also other countries, the assumption that people are going to have a second device like a smartphone. I know that everyone says, oh, well, everyone's got a smartphone, and it's an assumption we make that just isn't the case, or it's a very, very, very low spec smartphone in some countries that just wouldn't be appropriate. So I get it might work in some instances, but Michelle, what's your view around the second camera? I'm sure that Prometric have looked at this as well.
Yeah, so we've done beta testing. We've worked with partners who already have second cameras. We've done a lot of extensive research end to end, the same that Greg mentioned. We've talked to some of Greg's colleagues about this and shared our same experiences in the past as well. The return versus the investment and everything that Greg mentioned. It's the operational overhead. It's the candidate experience. It's another piece of stress for the candidate. And then we also looked at what are the cheating trends today? Would a second camera really help us capture what the cheating trends today are? And in our research and our actual data that we have, a second camera isn't going to help capture some of the things that we're seeing and what the latest trends are. We've actually just rolled out another second view, but it's not a mobile camera. It's a candidate desktop recording. So this is configurable per exam, per client, where some of the latest trends are people trying to technically, bring a virtual machine in or try to get around the lockdown to be able to cheat. So we're able to now understand what are people trying to do on their screens if a test sponsor would like to see that. We're still, constantly looking at the second camera and looking at all additional security layers that we can add. But to date, we have made the business decision that the pros are not there to bring in and introduce a second camera at this point in time.
So, Tim, I think it's all about the candidate experience then in terms of that question, because like I said, it might stop a very small percentage of those situations, but the burden it puts and the experience it creates, because let's face it, taking exams is very, very stressful at the best of times. I mean, I was reading somewhere someone was talking about wearing smart tech, wearable tech about, and I'm like, what? Because you're showing you're stressed because you're about to cheat. Well, also you're probably stressed because you're about to take an exam that's really important to you. So I think there certainly are, I guess, that balance between, it's always that, and also the cost, of course, as well. So there's also that involved. We've only got 8 minutes left. So I'm going to sort of, I appreciate if we can't answer all the questions, I should have said what we're going to do is share those. We'll get our experts to answer them. We'll use other sources and we'll share those afterwards. We'll also share the recording. As I said, we'll be doing some podcasts as well based on this. So I'm going to ask one last question. I'm going to start off with you, Adarsh. So I know we've touched on this, but we were just talking with the cameras about things that are happening during the test itself. I mean, what are the other things, without giving away any secret, source or information around the whole data forensics, in terms of you've got all this data and there's so much data about how quickly someone's answering a question and how long between questions.
Yeah.
And if they answered question 15, but they twitch their right eye and they do, all these sort of things. Is that an untapped area yet, or is it all everyone's doing it and I'm behind the times?
That's a great question, Patrick. Yeah. So you see literally, virtually every solution out there in the market. Most of the AI models seem to revolve around the same 3 or 4 data points, right? So all your data models are built around the front-facing camera, the screen recording of the candidate, maybe the audio of the room in which the candidate is taking the exam. And now in the last 1 year, like Greg mentioned, a secondary camera view. So it's essentially just the camera view and the microphone data that is being used by these AI engines to detect potential malpractice. Whereas there's a whole other set of data points that one could use. So it all depends on how much data is available to these remote proctoring engines, because a lot of this data comes from the test driver itself. In most of the cases, the test driver is part of the LMS that the university is running, or a third-party test driver, and then remote proctoring engine just hooks onto this test driver. So data patterns like response times that you mentioned, mouse movements, hopping back and forth between questions. All these will add a lot of value. It will give a multidimensional view into the candidate's behavior and the test response. Whereas most these models are ignoring those data points and just focusing on the camera and the microphone. That definitely is a great point. That is definitely an untapped area where the providers should focus on and build these multi-dimensional models for detecting potential malpractice.
I'll ask you the same question, Sharad, around other data sources or other.
Yeah. And I think that's a great question, and I'll answer it in 2 parts. So what all can be done today, and then what is the future looking like? So like Adarsh correctly mentioned, I think there are a lot of data points in terms of the speed at which a candidate is answering the questions, so on and so forth. And I think that is definitely something that we look at, but we do not look at it in real time, so to speak. So it's like a funnel approach. So you have various layers of proctoring and anti-cheating devices at play. And then this is a post-facto analysis that we do, that we take a data dump of the entire assessment drive, so to speak, where in the backend we have all these details about total time taken, number of times the student went back and forth, what is the time taken for each question, how much marks has he gotten, so on and so forth. So if any anomaly of that sort is observed, then our operations team, or we highlight it to the client, and then they deep dive into individual report. So that is what we do today. And I think, like Adarsh mentioned, this is going to catch up more and more, because uh, with the progress in AI and the sort of power behind data crunching that we are getting soon, I mean, the future that I sort of imagine is that all of us are wearing wearables at any given point of time. These variables are going to get more and more powerful. So why only limit this analysis to just the time taken between questions? Why not to the breathing rate, to the heart rate, and so on and so forth? But the point is that we need to be accurate. Just like you rightly mentioned, Patrick. I mean, I could just be anxious because I'm writing a very important test of my life, and not necessarily because I'm cheating. But then again, I think the patterns will emerge where we should be able to make some a good decision basis this data. It may be a couple of years ahead, not now, but definitely that is something which the future holds.
I'm going to ask you the same question, Greg, because I think it's a big area.
Yeah, data forensics, well established at Pearson VUE, leverages collusion analysis, time score. We look at item level data, but I think, Sharad, to your point, it's just one indicator. It's when you combine that with everything else in the end-to-end journey that starts to actually paint that picture. So very valuable, of course, just part of the landscape, that's all.
Okay, and finally you, Michelle, if there's anything to add?
Yeah, nothing to add. Agree with all the points that were made here. But coming back to your question, Pat, is this a untapped market? Absolutely. I mean, we all have so much data through the whole exam experience, to the overall health of an exam, to what are candidates' behaviors, what are clients' behaviors. I mean, everything end to end throughout the whole assessment lifecycle. There's so much data and analysis to be done that can help all of us. The test sponsors, the candidates, the assessment companies as a whole. I think there's a lot more to come from this, especially with tools like AI to help us analyze some of this data and make better business decisions and operational decisions and so forth.
Well, fantastic. I'm going to have to start winding up there. I really appreciate Michelle, Sharad, Adarsh, and Greg for your input. If I just had to sort of summarize it, I must admit, although we did prep beforehand and we had conversations, I think something that key that's come from me around this is the fact that there's lots of different options with remote proctoring. It's not just one thing. It's got different variations, different permutations of how you can use it in different use cases based on the customer or the sector. Plus, individual customers can customize their requirements based on what's appropriate for them. Again, I think perhaps some people might think that it's always just one size fits all, but that's not the case. You can customize it based on how you're using it. I think the other thing is probably there's, watch this space. I think there's a lot more that's going to happen in terms of now that we have access to more data, processing of data becoming more affordable, cheaper, video, etc. And of course, AI. I know there were some questions about AI that we didn't get a chance to answer, but we will, after the call, we will get those answers, get some input from people, and then we'll share those with them. Just to say as well as sharing the recording, we are going to make a podcast of this. So just to say, I might be recording some of the questions again. So don't suddenly think this is very strange if you do listen to a podcast. I think I didn't hear that, but only my questions, not the responses from any of the panel. So just to let you know. So that's taken us to time. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Session, just let us know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.